think we'd be all well served to call this track the smart and secure consumer, not just the smart consumer. There's an awful lot going on. I'll recount some, say, incidents episodes that might make you think twice about how you are using IoT in your life, and ways that you can protect yourself, and obligations of the various parts of the supply chain to protect you further. Okay? Go. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll wing that then. No, it's not a problem. So IoT, first of all, the same issues that we see in our digital lifestyles, our online web presence, are similar problems or vulnerabilities and security issues in IoT. I think we've all heard about Target. The Target breach was one of the most famous ones in recent history, where thieves got in through a payment system for vendors into the actual payment processors in store, and were able to install malware on all point-of-sale devices that took your credit card. Right? And they did that over the course of a couple of weeks to get into 1,700 stores, plus some fraction. And then on Black Friday, turned it on, and they were collecting 40 million, or later found to be 70 million credit cards from people shopping at Target through the Black Friday, all the way to mid-December, right? Now, how did this go for so long? The reason that they stopped this was the FBI discovered sales of credit cards on the dark web. Sales beginning at over $100 a card early on, because the lifespan of that card to whoever bought it in auction was pretty good. But by mid-December, when the FBI had announced it, they quickly dropped to like $27 a card. That's what they were worth, because they probably weren't only good for another hour. And this is the kind of world that we live in, honestly. So we had a network segmentation problem. There's no way that a vendor getting invoice payments for their services to Target should have been able to get, it wasn't the vendor, somebody breached the vendor's office and got their password, but getting logged in as a vendor should never have allowed them to be in the middle of the payment processors and collecting your credit card info. And then secondly, they should not have not seen this happening for 2 full weeks after they were collecting these 40 millions of cards, and this data being shipped off somewhere that normally Target data from credit card sales would never be shipped to. So there's many ways they could have seen this. This problem, or these problems, exist in IoT as well, right? So you need to be careful, I would say, of your IoT experience, your lifestyle with IoT. For example, the whole thing started because of a weak password by the vendor, the third-party supplier, right? How many of you actually have a wearable or some IoT device? Could be a webcam, it could be a smartwatch, whatever. Who has one of those? Fitbit. Usually that's the most popular, yes. So how many of you have changed the password that paired you to your device the first time? In fact, most of these applications don't let you change the password. So, and you know it was a very weak password when you first enrolled and paired with it. Having weak passwords, just like in the web presence, the web infrastructure, your digital lifestyle, is equally problematic in IoT, right? Your device can be taken over, and in the process of that, turned into either a bot. A bot is, and they turn, as you know, so again, in the web world, these same threats exist. A bot, and then a botnet army, an army of robots, basically, today consists of your PCs that get taken over by malware, and then they start being coordinated as an attack, an infantry attacking other parts of the internet, right? And that's a major threat to these other parties. And also sometimes your machine stops doing what it's supposed to do because it's so busy attacking other targets. In IoT, the same threat exists, right? So weak passwords allow adversaries to break into your machine and turn it into a botnet army. Now, there happens to be a study a couple months ago by Level 3, a major communication provider, on this particular threat, and they found over 100,000 webcams and online DVRs that had been turned into bots, right? And they were attacking various infrastructure. Now, this is this should be quite worrisome because those particular devices are high bandwidth, high computing power, video enabled, right? So they're pretty big and good machines, strong machines. But if you could take 100 million wearables and turn them into bots too, that's a formidable attack as well. Because sometimes all you have to do to attack something is just say hello, hello, hello continuously. And that's pretty small bandwidth. So your machines can become bots as adversaries, assets for other targets or on yourself. So please know weak passwords. And if you read the user forums, I guess I want to say this because I also said most of you can't change your password. They don't let you. There's no interface to change your password on your machine that you might be wearing. So read the user reviews and see what people who wrote more than a couple of lines said about it, you know, and also they'll talk about security. Can you configure who can see this data? How many users can interface with the device? What is that password? You know, take care of what you can do about protecting an IoT. And then you expect from these vendors, these application providers, to do things further to protect you. So in cybersecurity, what we call it is defense in depth or layers of security. So you have a strong password, good. Now if it still got breached, let's make sure there's network segmentation. So what you're doing to control your Fitbit and recording your sleep patterns, whatnot, or your DVR, if someone got into that, they can't also get into the entire back end of the application company and control that, right? So what happened in, if you were here last year at the Innovation Council sessions, the Commissioner of the Federal Trade Commission was speaking about some transgressions in mobile and IoT world. She talked about one of the first flashlight apps on your smartphone was actually tracking your location and selling it to other parties. So there's a lesson in IoT here. That was a handset, but in IoT, you should be informed if someone is going to collect location off your Fitbit wristband or your smartwatch or anything you've got, and you should consent in an informed way to that. Or you should at least receive a full disclosure so you can agree or not agree to do this, right? And in IoT, that would be the same. So what happened in this case is that flashlight company was shut down because they didn't get informed consent, they didn't disclose their intention. They sort of said, well, it's free, kind of what did you expect? We have to make money, but that's not good enough. User privacy is important, and they can't just go monetize your information, your bio, lifestyle information without your consent. Another case they talked about was a online home security over IP, over-the-top home security with webcams. This company got breached, and there were 600 webcams broadcast on the open internet. This actually was somewhat of a scandal because that's kind of really, you know, sensational stuff. Only 600, thankfully, but still. The reason, and they got a big fine for that, right? They got a big fine because they knew they had very sensitive personal information and they didn't take steps to safeguard it. At least in the case of the flashlight app, it was de-identified, anonymized, but they still didn't have a right to make money on it without your disclosure and consent. This company ignored the fact they held highly sensitive, confidential information about people, videos of them and their surroundings, and they got posted on the internet, and that lasted for quite a while till the FTC intervened. So you want to make sure you're dealing with reputable IoT companies. That's the message here. I don't want to sort of say startup companies without credentials and pedigree should be completely avoided. There's a lot of innovation that comes from them, but to consider your risk, I guess, would be first, right? If what you're going to do with this thing could present the company with sensitive personal information or control of your assets, then think twice about who you subscribe to, and look at the user reviews and see who looks like they behave with integrity, and stick to them for a while in this wild west of IoT. There may be some startups here that will want to object after I leave the stage, but they don't have the mic right now. So these are really important things. And there's more that we can, so I'm just talking about sort of discreetly. You have a wearable, you have an IoT device, you're working with a company who made that, and there's an application that benefits you for convenience or lifestyle. You take that a step further, say the connected car, and there's a whole set of stakeholders that could benefit, which would in turn come back to you as a benefit if they collaborated and they could see the data. So your driving habits, your driving experience and trending could be supplied, if you consented and were properly informed and they disclose that, could be shared with the dealership, so you only went and did maintenance when you needed it instead of every 5,000 miles. And there's enough people that never show up, so the cars aren't getting properly maintained, and or there's people that show up regularly and they're probably spending more money than they need to. So neither of those is good. The dealership would like you to come in for service when you need service. They'll get more people coming in, they'll make their money, everybody wins, right? The insurance company would like to know that you have good driving habits and would like to give you a break on your premium. There's so many ways you can get a reverse of a break on your premium. You know, it's only fair that you could get actually a benefit, a discount, a credit back, especially if you are a parent, and a lot of people in here clearly are parents capable anyway of parent age, that they have young drivers, and you pay a fortune for your young driver to be a driver on your vehicles. And imagine if they demonstrated good driving habits consistently, that you could save $1,000, $2,000 a year on insuring your young drivers in your family. There's real benefits from sharing data in a responsible and well-controlled manner. And that's where and we've all heard, it's the business is data in IoT. You get convenience, but the company that provided you that gets a lot of data that could be a benefit to many parties, as long as you are informed and you consent to that. And ideally, we promoted iconectiv that you could control that. So there should be an interface, a vehicle for you to say who gets to participate in my data and what is the nature of their participation, what are they authorized to do, and what do I get for it. So there should be a return for that, that consent, and you should get a benefit. There's so many ways that you can benefit from that, we at iconectiv believe that is the next frontier in IoT, not vertically walled garden custom implementations that can't speak to each other, but a high degree of interoperability with integrity on identities and the data that can be shared across constituents. So that's fundamentally the pitch, and this requires standards. And there's a lot of places that standards are being worked. I don't know if anyone in here has got a regulatory kind of career here, but we see standards from the FCC, we see standards from the Federal Trade Commission. If it's a certain vertical like finance, we see FFIEC setting standards for how data should be protected, the payment card interface, data security standards, and NIST, cybersecurity framework, and other standards, and say HIPAA, for example. So there's all kinds of people driving regulation that fosters standards depending on the use case, and then there's all kinds of standards organizations. So iConnect is involved in several of those. I'll just say that as I love this joke, the best thing about standards is there's so many to choose from. What does anyone think is the worst thing about standards? There's so many to choose from. So you have to play it in several camps in order to see what's going to prevail, and are they solving the problem in their way, and can you make use of that? So we're involved heavily in that sort of thing. If anyone is involved in a standard around IoT security, data privacy, data integrity, and identity of machines, then we'd love to talk to you. I think that's probably what I would do if I'm winging this and give you a chance to ask me some questions. Are there any questions? Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. What are we securing? So first thing in cyber is you look at the, I guess you call it the threat landscape. You look at this the IT architecture of the solution, and what kind of endpoints have you got, and are they trusted, right? Unfortunately, just like in the digital world, the machine world has a very similar vulnerability at the endpoint, and that is all of us. the person, the human using the device, is the greatest risk to the security of that system. Your weak password, your tendency to click on that link that sounds legitimate because there's some urgent thing, and if you don't validate your account through this link, it'll be locked up and you won't be able to get money the way you usually get money. So you click that link and you've just been phished, right? These risks that a person is susceptible to trusting things and taking action that are actually not real, they're fraudulent, exists in IoT, and frankly in a much bigger way. We're all going to end up with, I saw only like 8 or 9 hands go up of who's got a smart thing besides their phone. I asked this question next year. It'll be everybody, and it'll be, yeah, I have 10 things. Who's got, I'm going to go, who's got a thing? Who's got 5 things? Who's got 10 things? And the hands will be still hands up there. Every one of those is an endpoint that should be untrusted because it's in your hands, and you're not an IT professional, and has to be secured. So what the person can do with the thing, hopefully they can change their password whenever they want to, and hopefully the thing would not let them make the password, say, 6 zeros instead of 4, right? And that you would all behave accordingly and responsibly to protect yourselves as well. So the person and its interface to the machine through a portal or whatever, that needs to be thought of very carefully. The machine itself has to be thought of. A lot of machines are shipped with still what we call services in our lingo, or protocols turned on that were used for development and debugging and have nothing to do with their life in the production world where you're the user now. And they're still on, right? And they still have like default, like admin is the user password for absolute control of this device. So many of these things are still shipped like that, and people could basically use the internet to get to them and control them. So we need to make sure that the endpoint itself as a device does not have open protocols, open services that aren't used, does have a strong password type of stack on it to force you to change it when you first pair, right? That would be smart. Like anybody who gives you a temporary password, they force you on the web to go to a place where you change it, right? Like, how many of you have had that experience in IoT? I don't think any of you have had that. But this is Cyber 101, and we need to see that starting to show up. So you got to secure your endpoint and the person behind it. You got to secure the network that uses it, ideally encryption of the data in transit, but if not, then at least a little bit of extra, like we use what we call checksums or hashes to ensure that what comes into the application can be verified to have come from the device. So we call that non-repudiation. You basically mix the device's identifier with the data it's sent into a crypto hash and say, if they can reverse that and it's still the same, it's real. It came from that device. We need to see IoT providers doing that, and they're not doing that. Okay, they can't afford a crypto stack, but you could hash and throw this thing. It's not a big megabyte thing. You could throw that in a message. And secure at least the integrity of it from the user to the system, the back end. And then you've got to secure the back end itself, right? Network segmentation. What I can do as a user should never let me get in the back end and start being in command and control of the entire system. And unfortunately, like Target, and they're a real company with a real IT team, this stuff can happen if you don't use basic principles. So we need to see that whole supply chain from the cloud's application infrastructure, the network connection, the device, and the user behind it, which is all of you, doing what each person should do as an ecosystem to secure our IoT life. Hopefully that's helpful to you. One other question, maybe? How many people have 10 IoT devices? I'm going to check this next year, so I want to benchmark it. Nobody. Maybe this one guy. Okay. How many have 3? Yeah, okay. So that's kind of what you'd expect. Next year, you're all going to have 3, and there'll be 4 of those guys that have 10. Okay? So thank you so much for your interest. Protect yourselves in the IoT world. There's a lot that can happen. You don't want it to happen. And hopefully this has been helpful for you to safeguard yourselves.